Hello, can people hear me? If you can hear me, just respond in the chat box that you can hear me, if you wouldn't mind. Okay, great. Thank you very much. All right, we'll get started in a few minutes. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Statistics Solutions webinar. This one's a little different. It's called Surviving Your Dissertation. So we thought it would be helpful. We run, webinars on specific components of the study, specific chapters, sometimes just on chapter 1 or chapter 2 or chapter 3, sometimes on just specifically on, how to do your methods, sometimes specific statistical analyses. No, it is not for qualitative dissertations only. This is, the qualitative consultant part, forget that. It is a general guide to kind of tips about kind of living with your dissertation and finishing your dissertation, getting through your dissertation. So no, it is not just for qualitative, it is for qualitative and quantitative. As a matter of fact, it's very general in the sense that, like I was saying, it's not focused on any specific kind of chapter or any specific, like the methods or any specific kind of statistical analyses. It's more of a general kind of guide about, general tips to kind of help you get through. So that's what it is, again, for either quantitative or qualitative. So we do have a support person on, Sierra, and she is giving you some information now where the webinar can be found. It's archived on our website. I believe you also get a copy in your email. If you have any questions about those aspects, you can ask in the chat box. You can ask Sierra in the chat box. Okay, as far as any questions about the content or the presentation of the webinar, feel free to type your questions in the question and answer box, but I'll just wait until the end to get to them. Okay. So yeah, like I said, surviving your dissertation, it's again, it's just kind of a helpful guide to try to help you get through. It's going to cover different things. So we're not really, specifically covering, in depth about things like analyses or the lit review or the chapter 1. So this is more kind of a general, time management, how to handle stress, what to expect, how to choose a topic. So these kind of general things that can help you kind of get through, kind of manage your time, kind of, what to expect, your role, your chair's role. So things like this, that sometimes they're real important, is sometimes as equally important as the content, but sometimes we don't think about them, or we kind of give them a backseat because we're thinking about the content. Obviously, the content of your dissertation is the most important, but without all these other strategies, it's hard to produce the content. It's hard to to revise it to where it's in good shape. It's hard to defend it. So all these other things that the intangibles sometimes we don't think about play a big factor, and not only the success but the timeliness of moving through the process. So this is what we're going to be covering. Topic, what's a study, knowing what's required, time management, staying focused, working with your chair, perseverance and process stress, and some pro tips at the end. Okay, so choosing a topic, obviously this is if you're near the beginning, or if you haven't started yet. I understand some of you may be in different places right now in the dissertation process. So this would apply more to if you're starting at the beginning. Choosing a topic ideally should stem kind of organically from your coursework, right? You're doing content work, coursework at this level before you get to the dissertation. So you already are writing papers. You're already doing, classwork, research for class. You already have research interests. So ideally, your topic should stem from your coursework and your previous research in the courses. and not only is this, it makes sense as far as your interests, right? But it also makes sense in the sense that you already have some background. You already have some background research on what you're doing, right? So you're not kind of hitting the ground, without anything. So again, ideally, see if you can kind of transition your work from what you've been doing in courses to the topic for your dissertation. It says choose something you're interested in, question mark. Always a good point, a good starting point. If you're interested in something, you're likely to kind of be more involved in it, more engaged. And it's a good starting point. And I say starting point because interest in a topic can draw you to it. But then at that point, to develop a research problem, which is, the kind of basis of the study, the rationale, why do we need to conduct a study? Well, there's this information we don't know, or there's some kind of problem in the research that needs to be addressed. That's developed by looking into the literature to see what's been done on the topic and what still needs to be done. So interest will only take you so far, right? It takes you to a certain point, and at that point, you need to kind of dive into the literature and just kind of research and see what's out there on what you're interested in. So that's why I kind of say interest is a good place to start. It'll get you to a certain point, and then again, the next stop along the way there is to do the research on what you're interested in, to see what actually exists in the research and what still needs to be done. Okay, and yeah, and I want to emphasize that in the research problem is developed not from what you think needs to be done or what you've observed in practice. Let's say you're a teacher and you have all kinds of practical knowledge, you observe things, and you say, from what I see in the classroom, this is what we really need to research. And it's like, okay, that's good. That's a good starting point again. But when you sit down to kind of develop your research problem, which again is kind of the basis of the study, the rationale, you have to go to the literature and support that, your practical observations or whatever it is you're kind of bringing to bear on it. That needs to be kind of supported in the literature. A couple other things here when you're choosing your topic, make sure that your topic aligns with your program. This happens periodically. I work with people that they'll be in the School of Leadership, but they'll be conducting a study on something else. It won't be on leadership, or they think it will be. So, and it kind of sounds kind of fundamental, and it is, but sometimes it's easy for people to get kind of so focused on something they kind of don't see the bigger picture. So just make sure what your topic is, it aligns with your program, right? Because that's a big place where your chair or somebody can come along and say, hey, this doesn't align with what you're studying. Okay, and also remember when you're choosing a topic, you can't do, your study can't save the world, right? I mean, you can't do everything. It's just a study. It's important, but if it's education, it's not gonna, fix all the educational woes that there are. It's on something very specific, and it'll provide, important information. But sometimes people have a kind of an inflated sense of what their study should and can do. Okay, so this is just general things about choosing a topic, kind of getting to a place where you can, once you choose a topic, narrow it down, go to the research and narrow it down even farther based on, what's in the research and what research still needs to be conducted. And we do give webinars on chapter 1s, where we talk more about the research problem, what the research problem is, and how to develop the research problem. This is kind of a broad issue, kind of choosing a topic. Okay. Okay, what is a study? And by this, I'm not kind of making a joke. I'm just saying a study is something that's very specific. And if you've never conducted a study before, right, which you probably haven't if you're at this stage, it's okay to ask what a study is. Because as we go through graduate school, we write papers, we write argumentative papers, we write research papers. And those are specific genres, of academic work. The study is yet another thing. So it's helpful at the beginning when you get started, do some research on your own, but also into, your school, what the information that they're providing on the program and on the dissertation, on the study. Get up to speed on what a study is. I mean, it's a very focused investigation of something, right? So it's not a research paper, right? It's not an argumentative paper. It's not like the things that you may have been used to writing at the grad level. Understand what the components of a study are. I mean, obviously you're going to understand it more as you go along, but just kind of get an overview, right? And generally, the parts of a study of a typical social sciences study is, the chapter 1 is the introduction, where it lays out what you're going to do, why you're going to do it, and how you're going to do it. Chapter 2 is typically the literature review. Chapter 3 is typically the methods, where you lay out how you're going to get your data, how you're going to analyze your data. Chapter 4 is typically where you present your results, and chapter 5 is typically where you discuss your results. So yeah, so it's helpful to just understand what a study is, get the big picture, how the parts fit together. There's also other parts in between. You have the chapters, you have associated processes like the IRB, which is the Institutional Review Board, where they review. There's a form you have to fill out because you're doing research. They have to approve that research. So there's a form with very specific things you have to fill out, understand what that is. There's the proposal defense. There's also the final defense. These are 2 other associated steps in the overall process. So so take time to kind of review your skills materials as you're getting into it, to see what's needed, what's required, what these things are. Just so when you kind of get further along in the process, you don't kind of hit something and you're kind of completely surprised. Okay, knowing what's required, this is related. So always, first and foremost, obtain your school's dissertation template or guidelines. I mean, I can't stress that enough. I mean, that is going to be what you go to understand what you need to do. Obviously, your chair is there to guide you and to facilitate your learning. But the guidelines, the dissertation handbook, I mean, there's several things. There's usually like a checklist, what specifically should be contained in the chapter. There's sometimes just a formatting guide, like the way your paper should look. And sometimes there's, like a grad school handbook, which is kind of a little more comprehensive. It has other things besides just the dissertation. So get a hold of the dissertation template that tells you what's required in the chapters and in the sections in the chapters. I mean, that will be your guide, right? And as well as your chair. Familiarize yourself, go to the handbook where it talks about the dissertation process, familiarize yourself with the content of the dissertation and what's involved in the process. What's the step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 200 or whatever it is. Just understand the steps in the process. Again, you can use it as a reference. You don't have to remember everything. That's not the idea. Because it is a reference, you can go back to it as needed, but it is just kind of good to get a heads up as you go into it. So again, you're not kind of surprised, or you're not going into things cold. This would also include things like your role as a learner, what's expected as you as a learner, what's expected from your chairs, right? Your chairs have certain roles and responsibilities, and your committee members. Sometimes that involves getting back to you with comments and feedback in a timely manner. What is a timely manner? I don't know. Sometimes it says in your dissertation handbook, sometimes it's a couple of weeks, sometimes it's a month, sometimes it's unspecified, but see what the roles of the chairs are as it's printed there, the roles of your committee members, your role as a learner. And while the chair and the committee members are there to facilitate you and help you along, it always falls back on the learner. The onus is really on the learner to kind of to initiate things, to make progress. Your chair is there to help you. They're not necessarily there to kind of prod you along, even though they sometimes do, check in on you and things like that. That's always helpful. But as an independent learner, the kind of onus is on you to be responsible for your own learning and your own progress. So just kind of know what's required based on the template and the grad student handbook. Time management, of course, this is a biggie, and it's a big one, not just in your dissertation, but in your job, in life, right? Everything else. As we know, I'm not telling you anything new. Time management is the key to productivity. That means, like anything else, if you want to make progress or you want to advance, you need to put the time in, right? If you want to, if you're an athlete, right, you want results, say in the gym, or, you want to be able to run a certain length, a couple miles, and you're not there yet. You have to put in that time, right? You have to practice. You have to go to the gym. You have to work out, to make progress. You have to run to get your endurance and your strength up. So like anything else, the dissertation, you have to put time into it. And time management then becomes a priority, because it's a big endeavor. I mean, there's just no way around it. It is time consuming, and takes your attention and your concentration. So it's best, like anything else, schedule, regular scheduled work times to get things accomplished. I know people do the binge working, or I'm going to have a break in 2 weeks. I'm going to work on my dissertation on that break, which is good, but you should still have regular work times, right? It just helps you stay on top of things. Binge working sometimes, I mean, that's kind of sometimes really unproductive. I know we all do it sometimes, we have to, but just not working on it and then leaving it, and then, oh gosh, I have a deadline, I better hustle and get this chapter done. That puts a lot of stress on you, and it also it sometimes doesn't produce the best work. So if you can, regular scheduled times to work on your dissertation. Schedule work times, yeah, and keep them, right? like I said, yeah. And remember that life never takes a break, right? Life will always intrude on you if you let it. And that's just the way it is. There's always going to be family. There's always going to be issues that life throws at you. Work is always going to be something with work. That's just life. We all know that. We're familiar with that. Life throws things at us all the time. And you don't want that to become your go-to excuse. When you go to your chair, oh, well, I couldn't do this because I had this going on, or I had this going on. Now that does happen. It does happen. I mean, things do happen, no doubt. But you don't want it to become this, well, something came up and so I couldn't get my chapter done. You don't want life to be your go-to excuse, because again, remember, things in life is always going to happen. So you kind of have to account for that, or kind of build in contingencies. So time management, big. And again, you're going to be juggling time with your dissertation, work, family, friends, hobbies, whatever else. So you're going to find the time in your day is really shrinks once you start working on a dissertation, because it's yet another thing that's going to demand your time and your concentration. All right, staying focused, alignment. This is more about staying focused. I mean, you staying focused on your project obviously is important, and the time management will help with that. You know, if you stick with it a little bit, you know, over the course of time rather than, you know, binging, that's going to help you stay focused. But this is more of like the focus of your actual study, the alignment of your study, because it's real easy to get off topic. And you'll hear your chair say this too, alignment. You need to alignment. It doesn't align. This doesn't align with what you're doing, or your research question. This doesn't align with your research question. So a couple tips here. Just avoid topic drift. If you have something you're studying, stick with that, you know, those constructs or those variables or those factors. Avoid what I call associative rabbit holes. I mean, when you get into something, you're going to notice that ideas are connected and constructs are connected. And it's real easy to say, oh yeah, this is kind of like what I'm doing. And next thing you know, you're like 17 ideas away from what you're doing. So it's easy to kind of get sidetracked, and not sidetracked into like you think you're sidetracked in the sense that you think what you're doing is still kind of related to your study. That's what I mean by these associative rabbit holes and this topic drift. So what I suggest is to just make sure you stay focused as you work on your study. Remember that the real spine of the study that reflects your focus are the research questions, the purpose, and the research problem, right? So really the research problem comes first. You know, there's an issue in the research, or a problem, or a gap, or something we don't know that needs to be addressed. Okay, that's going to like drive the need for your study. You develop research questions to address the research problem, right? So those should align. And your purpose is just basically a statement that reflects what you're doing. You know, the purpose of this study is to. So all those things should align. Now, if they're already aligned, you're working on it as you work through your study. Just to make sure you stay focused, what I suggest is that you just pull your research problem out, your research questions, and your purpose, and put it in another document. That way you have those three things that you can consult whenever you need to. You know, if your chair said this section doesn't align with what you're doing, and you're working on a section, I mean, have your research problem, your RQs, and your purpose pulled out, so when you're working on something, you can look over and you can pull it up and see exactly what you're doing. So you don't have to kind of keep it in your head. I mean, it's a small thing, but it seems to help. Okay, working with your chair. Because this is a relationship, right? It's a working relationship. It's what it should be. You know, and chairs are people. So they have personalities. They have their own ways of doing things. I mean, ideally your chair is there to help you, and they genuinely are there to help you. Again, they're people. Some they have different ideas, different ways to go about that. And these are just points that you want to keep in mind. It's a working relationship, right? So you want to be professional, you want to be respectful, you want to be consistent. That means being consistent means don't, you know, pop up every 6 months and say, hey, I'm ready to do something, and then kind of disappear, right? And so it's really kind of about developing a communication avenue and developing a working relationship with your chair. A couple things. Sometimes I know this from experience. I talk to people, they avoid contact with their chair. I know why they do, and they tell me why, but I don't understand it, because they're intimidated. their chair intimidates them, so they avoid contact. And I get that. I mean, I understand it, but you're not going to make any progress by avoiding your chair. Even if your chair intimidates you, I mean, you still have to work with them. And sometimes chairs intimidate you, and it's more of maybe the way we perceive the way they are, rather than them actually being intimidating. And I think the nature of the relationship is automatically, well, not automatically, but it has a propensity to intimidate the learner, because you have a chair who you think knows everything, which they know a lot, but they don't know everything. You're a learner. So you have that power imbalance immediately. And so people get intimidated by that. And that doesn't matter, irrespective of what their chair has said or done, the power kind of dynamic in relation kind of intimidates them right off the bat. So I would try to, if I were you, just kind of, if that you think you're in the same boat, just try to kind of think about that how much of it is just kind of perceived power imbalance and not necessarily that your chair is intimidating. Now, some chairs may be intimidating, maybe it's the way they talk or whatever, but you still have to work with them. So you have to kind of address that or get over it, or because you don't want to avoid your chair. Keep your chair in the loop about your plans, and plan changes. Plans do change; they change all the time, right? So but keep your chair in the loop, right, about what you're doing. Just keep it open, avenue of communication. You don't want to bug them, but at the same time, they need to know if like you plan to have something to them this week, and something happened, you're going to get it to them next week. Just keep them in the loop. Know that chairs differ. Some are more hands-on than others. Some are more hands-off. But the onus, again, is still on you as the learner to kind of initiate contact, to kind of make progress in your own learning. And when necessary, sometimes it is necessary to advocate for yourself and advocate for your work. And there's respectful ways to do that. If you feel really strongly about something, a way of doing something, and you can argue for it, it's okay. Sometimes your chair is fine with that. If you can make a case for what you want to do or a certain way to do it, if you can make a case for it, that's fine. Usually they're okay with that. They just don't want you to make changes or do something different without any kind of good reason. So sometimes you do have to advocate, kind of stand up for your work, or stand up for your position, or stand up for yourself. And again, but that can be done in a firmly, but still respectfully. Okay, so perseverance and process. This is just understanding, about understanding the dissertation as a process, and it is a process. It's a process that takes place over a year or more. So it's a long process. It's an involved process. It has many kind of components. It's recursive, which means you can come back to something that you thought you were done with. I thought I was done with chapter 1. Why do I have to go back to chapter 1? Well, one of your other committee members hasn't seen it yet, and they have comments. So it is a process, and it does, involve perseverance. All right. It's like an exercise in perseverance, sticking with it, sticking through the process, understanding the process, making sure the steps happen in the process. And again, knowing that it can be recursive. Understanding the process of submission feedback is part of that. You submit, right? Your chair or your reviewers have a certain amount of time to get back to you. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But if they have 2 weeks and it's been 2 weeks, you're well within your right to just politely say, I was wondering, about the feedback. But understand too that this is how the process works. Some people think that they're going to submit something and they're going to get it through. And it's like, that doesn't happen on the first shot or the second shot or the third shot. Usually it's a process, right? You're learning how to do it. And part of what's going on is not just that you're submitting something to be checked off, you're learning how to do it along the way. So the comments are not only to help you move the document forward and move, the whole process and the study forward, but the comments are also to help you learn, right? So learning and that the whole give and take of comments is part of the process. So you're going to submit something, you're going to get comments. You address the comments as best you can. If you don't understand something, you meet with your chair, you talk to them about it so you get clarity, then you do the best you can, you submit it again, and you repeat until there's no more comments. So that's just part of the process, and it takes some perseverance. And that's, I covered the role and purpose of comments. Okay. See anything else with that? Oh yeah, and you're going to feel overwhelmed at some time with the process, right? There's just no doubt. It's going to happen. What do we do when we feel overwhelmed? Well, like anything else, it's usually best to compartmentalize and prioritize, right? So if you're working on, sometimes this happens if you're working on, the proposal chapters 1, 2, and 3 at the same time. That's 3 different chapters, right? With 3 different sets of expectations and things to do. So, or even other parts within chapters. So if you're starting to feel overwhelmed, like, oh my God, what am I going to do first? Compartmentalize, right? What's most important, and then prioritize what's most important. I'm going to get this done first. All right, then I'm going to focus on this. Then I'm going to focus on this. So it's like other things in life too. Compartmentalize things, take them in chunks, and take the most important one first. Okay. Okay. Also about the process too, getting as much correct as you can. This is important because I see folks turn in things that they're really focused on the content, maybe, which of course is what should be, but like the writing or the grammar or the formatting is bad. And so, but it affects the way your reader perceives the content. So everything that's in your control that you can get right, get it right, so in other words, if you see there's a typo there, don't just let it go and say, that's not important. Fix it now, right? Fix it now. So, and the idea is that there's so many things that are out of our control. Is the chair going to like this? Are they going to agree with this? You don't know. That the things that are in your control, this word is misspelled. I'm gonna correct it. Get those things that are in your control, address them, right? So you don't hand in a sloppy draft. Okay, and that's kind of what it is, because it's also about your chair, rightly or wrongly, will make judgments about your work ethic. You give them a sloppy draft, they go, okay, what is this? I'm looking at the content, which is all right, but the rest of it looks terrible. So always remember, when you're always presenting your work, always put your best foot forward whenever possible, right? On all aspects of the work. Now, that doesn't say that you're going to know everything about formatting. You can know everything about, grammar. But if you see something and it's clearly off, address it, right? So get those things right that are in your control. Do it, because there's a lot of things that are out of our control that we can't, it's hard for us to get right. Okay, stress. The dissertation can be a major stressor. That's no news to anyone who's involved in it right now. There's a lot of reasons for that. It's you're going to live with it for at least a year or more. It's money. It costs money. It's time. It's attention. It's focus, concentration. You have the rest of your life going on. Yes, it's a major stressor. One way to reduce stress is to stay engaged with your study. I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, like, oh, I'm going to be engaging. The more I'm in my study, the more it stresses me out. I get that. But it also, what will stress you out too is if you just like let it sit. You think you won't be stressed out about it, but it's always going to be there in the back of your mind. Like, oh, I got to get back to it. I got to get back to it. So staying on top of it, staying engaged. And then that also prevents, when you get disengaged, you have to come back. It's sometimes a real challenge to get re-engaged. So stay engaged with your study. And obviously, this is, everybody knows this, find stress relief strategies that work for you, whether it's walking is great, exercise, going out with friends, blowing off some steam, whatever it is. It's all different for all of us, but you're going to need some way to cope with stress. And don't underestimate the effects of stress. And at the same time, don't catastrophize about stress. We do that too, right? Sometimes we oh my gosh, we freak out. So don't go to the extremes. Don't underestimate it. Don't overestimate it. But just kind of have strategies to deal with stress and understand that it will be a part of your life with the dissertation. Okay, some pro tips to leave you with here. As far as references, and this especially becomes important when you start writing your lit review. Keep track of your references early and throughout. There are, let's see, there are reference, I think Zotero was one I'm going to put here in the chat box. Zotero. There are other ones, RefWorks, maybe another one. These are ways to, these are tools to keep your reference, that help you organize your references. So, I mean, you can look it up, just look up different ones on Google, see what works for you. You can use them, you don't have to use them, but they can be helpful to organize your references, to keep them organized, so you know what you have, so you know what you're using. But you want to, as you begin your study, keep a document, keep a references document that with your references, because you don't want to, like, hey, I may use this one, and you don't save it, and then you do end up using, you have to go back and find it. Or if you're going to use a reference, you're using a reference and you drop it, right? It needs to be pulled out of your references list. So it's just good to kind of keep track of your references as they come into your document, and some of them may leave. Okay, use 2 monitors. I don't know if people have the ability to use 2 monitors, but when I started working here years ago, I didn't use 2 monitors. And when I use 2 monitors, I'm never going to go back to 1. Some people use more than that. I don't need more. But what this allows you to do is, and you can split your screen, that happens, but it kind of makes things smaller. But using 2 monitors, you can work on your document, and then you can have another monitor to look at maybe a previous draft, right, with comments on it, or notes or research. Just 2 documents seems to kind of, it helps, I think. So it's something you may want to try if you're not doing that already. Okay, learn your tools. This is things like, PowerPoint. You're gonna have to give a PowerPoint presentation at some point. Usually Word obviously is a big one. Any kind of search tools. This doesn't mean you need to know everything about Word, but you're going to be sending things through Word documents. You're going to be using some of these tools and resources, so it's best to just kind of understand the fundamentals of them. The search function is your friend. Okay, the search function, some people don't use it very often, and it's like it's one of the most useful things I use all the time, because I'll be looking at a document that's somebody's dissertation, it's 100 pages or more. I want to find something very specific. Am I going to scroll through that whole thing to look for that? No, you just use the search function. So it's a way to tame the document too. You know, I see people do this. I'm on the phone with them. Oh, I got to go to my research questions, and they scroll. I was like, just type in research questions in your search box. And it works for other sections. The purpose of this, you want to go right to your purpose, you know, type in the purpose of the study is, or, you know, if it's a specific construct or specific factor or variable you're looking for. Anyway, it's just a way to kind of, it saves time. So you don't have to scroll through your document. It's also a way to kind of tame your, you know, your document, because you can go right to whatever it is you want to go to. So the search function, Google Scholar is your friend. We all know about Google Scholar. We should, right? A lot of academic libraries actually have Google Scholar in them now as a search tool. And one of the reasons why it's your friend, obviously it's good, it's quick, you don't even need to go into an academic library, anybody can access it. So that's what makes it very friendly that way. You can get peer-reviewed resources in case you need like a quick lookup of something. But here's where it's also helpful. When you want to update a reference, okay, this happens, say, you know, your chair says, oh, this reference in your lit review is outdated, you got to update it. Okay, one easy thing to do is just to throw that title into Google Scholar in the search bar. That will come up, and it will show you also, there'll be a section that will show you who has cited that. So for something like that, for updating references, you can see who has cited it and more recent studies that have cited the one that you should be updating. So for things like that, it's helpful too. Also use your resources and your support. This includes school resources. When you get to the lit review, a reference librarian, they're very helpful. That's part of their jobs, is to help learners. So you're not kind of imposing on them or anything. You know, any kind of resources like that the school have. Some schools have writing centers. You know, anything that you can avail yourself of that will help you. Any kind of support, any kind of resources, tutors. And lastly, reference, also example dissertations, I'm sorry. In references and support, I want to include example dissertations. You know, it's just something, and sometimes your chair will give you these if you ask them, but just something that shows, sometimes there's, you go to your resources, you look at the template, you go to webinars, but sometimes there's just no better substitute for an example when you sit down to write. How did this person handle this section? What did they do? So example dissertations can be helpful too. And the last point is, if you don't know something, look it up. I mean, we live in an age where literally all this information is at our fingertips. I have people on the phone, I don't know what they mean by such and such, you know, look it up. I mean, I'm happy to talk to people about it and explain it to them, but you know, triangulation, your chair mentioned triangulation. How are you going to triangulate your data? What's triangulation mean? Internet's right here. And you know, obviously you want to kind of be a little considerate about what you look at, right? I mean, peer-reviewed sources or kind of a reputable source. But the point is, you can get the ball rolling for the search right in the internet if you don't know something. Just don't guess. You don't have to go ask somebody else. You look it up. And as somebody who's a little older and not a digital native, it took me a long time to remember that. You know, I'd ask people questions. Hey, what about this? And you know, I had to condition myself to go look it up myself rather than to ask somebody. Okay, so that is it. This is, I hope this is, like I said, this is a little different webinar. It's kind of a more general, kind of a getting through, you know, the dissertation, some of the intangibles, not so much the nuts and bolts of what's the content, which of course most of our webinars are on the nuts and bolts stuff. So this is who we are. This is our contact information. So, I mean, it's a free consult if you want to just talk to somebody and see if what we offer is right for you. We do editing. consulting, guidance, statistics. So if you're interested in that, there's the information, and I'll take any questions now. If you guys want to type questions in the question and answer box, I'd be happy to try to help answer them. Try to answer them. Any questions? Okay, well, if there's no questions, we do offer other webinars, like I said, on specific components of the dissertation of the study, specific chapters. So look at our webinar schedule and see if there's another one you want to attend on something more specific. And I wish you all a good day, and thank you for coming. Take care.